one tonight that will go on. I mean, this one will go on YouTube as well. But we'll simply just see what happens. So today's October 15th, for those who are listening, and we're doing on YouTube. You know how to do this. Double tap on your left side of the screen, you get 10 seconds before, and you can watch the information roll by again. If you've already seen it, double tap on your right, and 10 seconds will fly ahead. So here goes. Predominance. I will just tell you where we're going next week, because homework you already have. That was sent out yesterday. That is due on Monday. If you're one of the students that I coach privately, and you know who you are, then just sit in here and I will try my best to catch you up to speed as best I can. But that is more easily done on an individual basis, instead of having students sort of slow down the progress by asking a lot of questions that we will get to. It's easier for me to do that privately. Just know that if there's some information that is just rolling over your head, is, oh, I don't know this, right? Then don't panic. I'll catch up to speed. Become pretty good at that. That is, in fact, the way we do it. The way we roll at Nlsa College. I'm looking at my wife there. Because that's the way that we do it. Okay, so little tonic expansion, and I'm simply just going to roll it out in some key. I'm going to choose what? F major. Because I always do it in G. Let me do it in F major. I'm going to outline a little tonic expansion thing here. So 1, 2, 3. And I'm going to put 3, 2, 1. So 3, that'll be, I'll take this A. So we're in the key of F. Well, now we are in the key of F. I'm going to take the last note and put it up here as my first note. That's some biblical reference on that, but the last one should be the first. So, and I'm simply just going to do that. And I can choose, this one is obviously going to be a tonic triad. I'm going to fill it in like that. F and A would be my chordal third, and then C would be my fifth, and then double the bass in a root position triad. But very often you would see that beginnings will start with the root in the bass and the third on top, because that's a very good place to start. Later on, when we get into real part writing, that will be next week and beyond. I'll explain why that's a good strategy. This one here can be harmonized in one of two ways, which you've done. Both. The easiest way to do it is just to take a passing 6/4 chord. So that's basically scale degree 2 with an 8, a 6, and a 4. Remember, these are not scale degrees. This is a scale degree. That refers to this note in the bass. In the key of F, G is scale degree 2. And it's doubled because in passing chords and 6/4 chords in general, you can see that we are actually just doubling the bass. That also it goes for a lot of, so 6/4 chords are bass double. I'm not going to get into a discussion of whether, in the case of the cadenza 6/4 chord, whether the bass is the root of the chord or if it's the fifth scale degree or whatever. It's the fifth scale degree, whether that's the root or the fifth of the chord. That's a long discussion. We can have it once these details are mastered, and I'm absolutely willing to have it. But you understand that a passing 6/4 chord in this context, because passing 6/4 chords can prolong a lot of different scale degrees, a lot of different tonal functions, but in this case, it is a tonic prolongation because I have a 1 chord here and I have a 1/6 chord here, which is a 1 chord, right? So this one here, I'll simply just call P6/4. The 8 you will not often see, but that's what it is. So it's scale degree 2 with an 8, a 6, and a 4 above it. If I were to break it down even further, the 8 is the octave, that's the G. The 6 is obviously 2 steps down from 8, that will be that one. And the 4 would be 4 steps above the G. That would be 1, 2, 3, 4, C, and I put it up here because that's the proper range for the tenor. There's nothing more to it. Then I'm going to finish it off by doing a cadenza 6/4 chord. I'm just going to kneel down here because that will look really cool, I'm sure. And I'm going to take scale degree 5 in the bass now. I'm going to repeat that. And I'm going to stack an 8, a 6, and a 4 above that. So here's the answer to your other question. This is one where we started the semester. And if you're one of these students that I'm trying to catch up with what we did back in September, well, good luck to me, right? But also, you will get it along the way because this is a procedure that we're doing over and over and over again because that's the only way to really learn it. So the answer to what is a cadenza 6/4 chord is this is one. It is scale degree 5 with an 8, a 6, and a 4 above it. So I'm going to do just that. And I'm going to do the same voicing as I have in the beginning here. So I'm going to do the A up here. So I'm going to start, not because these two don't have to be necessarily in order. They're just listed in ascending numerical order. It doesn't say anything about where the 8 is. Is it in the upper voice, as you know, as it is here, for instance? It doesn't need to be, but above that bass, these are intervals above the bass, right? Above that bass, somewhere in the 3 upper voices, there's a 6 above the C. I'm choosing to put that up here. So the 6 is now gone, and I'm going to take the 4 right below it. Now that's gone, and then the octave would be here. You see? You can voice the 3 upper voices whichever way is most convenient. So it lines up with what came before it and where it's going to. In between here, we have the predominant. I'm going to plug my predominant in, and I'm going to show you how this works in context, because pretty soon, i.e. by next week, we should all be able to write progressions this long. This is not, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So it's not really super challenging, but it is a very good image of how music behaves. Remember that these procedures here very often play out during the course of, let's say, a 20 measure phrase, where you have to identify where these things are happening. They're not just happening every time you see a 2 chord. That's a predominant, and you know that's a sort of mindless labeling just of chords. We have to understand within that hierarchy of when do we feel that the end is coming up, you know. So it's a musical judgment. It's not just a labeling. Music theory, I think, let's say 50 years ago, maybe a little bit more than 50 years, certainly in Europe, that's in some ways been ahead of the United States. I mean, perhaps easy to understand because most of the theory were developed in Europe. So a little over half a century ago, music theory consisted simply just of labeling. You know, if you could just label these chords with some sort of Roman numeral and some numbers after it, you've done your job. That's not the way it is anymore. And I would say that for the last probably 30 years, the United States have been ahead of that way of promoting music theory as being something that is understanding the context between the way the music appears to the ear, what experience it gives us, and the way that we label things. So merely labeling what ingredients are in here, it's almost the same as anatomy. I mean, if you want to study psychology, a sort of list of chemical structures that are present in the human body would not really reveal very much about psychology. That goes without saying, doesn't it? Still, chemical imbalances are a foundation for many of the things that psychologists are dealing with. So we can't just ignore it. And I'm not ignoring it either. I'm adding a lot of detail here, but I'm trying to interpret, and I'm trying to pass on to you this understanding that the ear is a very important player in the understanding of what music theory is. So our musical experience is rolled in. It's really the determining factor for whether we call this a 5-chord or a 1-chord. In my course, because I can, I'm not calling it 1, which you could. If you look at this chord, you could call it 1 because F is in fact the only note from which the other notes stack in thirds. You could also call it a C chord because it works in conjunction with the next chord, which is the dominant 7 chord. I'll get to that in a split second. But neither label really conveys completely how the ear perceives this chord. Obviously, as I've demonstrated a couple of times, roll back to some of the earlier discussions about the cadenza 6/4 chord. We can understand that this one is probably going to be horribly out of tune, but we can understand that this chord here is not really a finishing chord. Okay, so that one is out of tune, but that's fine. We'll live with that. We understand that if we have the tonic chord in the second inversion, that is certainly not a tonic because the ear will not accept it as a tonic. Although empirically, I can prove that F is the root of that chord, and that should be a tonic chord. So therefore, in the old system, you would simply just mindlessly, in my opinion, just label this a 1 chord, which it isn't. Says who? Well, says the ear. No musician could ever hear a piece ending in a 6/4 chord and say, yep, we're ready to go home now, and the fat lady has sung and it's over. This simply just not the way it works, and therefore we are going to try to avoid that discussion by calling it, as everyone does, regardless of whether you come from the old school of just labeling, or you come from a newer set of paradigms where you call the 5-chord or whatever. We just call it a cadenza 6/4 chord because that's what everyone calls it. Okay, so far so good, I hope. Not just burning through time here, but simply just to illustrate that this is the end of the semester is coming up, right? We're in October now, and I know that if I don't get all my stuff in before Thanksgiving, people come back with turkey brains and they can't, take in any more new information. And that's going to be the time where all the teachers who haven't planned thus are going to hit you with even more homework than you get right now. And that's not pretty, and it's not very productive because people are going to really, really sink under this pressure. And I've seen it for 15 years that students who are otherwise very good, especially students who are very duty bound and hand in their work on time and all that, if they get too much, they have a tendency to let all of it go. And that's not pretty. It's not good because if you're used to getting A's because you're doing good work and you're handing in on time, et cetera, it's very hard, it's heartbreaking in fact, to see that because of circumstances, we have plenty of circumstances right now, but let's say you add an extra load of homework that has to be handed in. I can't get more than a C. And then you say, okay, bugger it, I'm just gonna cut out of my classes and take the F and do it over next semester. I've seen this countless times, and it's heartbreaking every time. So I'm trying to say this is where it's going. It's not going to be more difficult than this at the end of the semester. But all these different components, I want you to be able to master at the end of this semester. Some of you are already there. God bless you. You're doing great. Some are not there yet, and we'll try to get as many as you who want to get there to be on the right team. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, these 3 notes, we see we have 3 notes above. So these are the intervals above the base. They each represent a note that is at a distance, meaning an interval above that base. They all go down. We can see that because the numbers go down. This one goes down to here. This one goes down to here. And this one goes down to the kind of B that we have in the key of F. And I want you to not work with a key signature because by the time you get here, you've long forgotten that there's actually a flat in that. So you're just writing in C major, basically, and think that the key signature is going to take care of everything for you. It's not. It's certainly not in the minor mode, because if I wanted to change this to the minor mode, all I would have to do is to change one note. This third scale would have to be flattened in the minor mode, but otherwise, all these other procedures stay the same. That's the sort of little spark of genius that in the way we do it here at Nlsa College. Okay, this one here, you can see that these two will go together because this is the leading tone. It will go up. This one is scale degree 2. So that one, 3 blind mice, is the best ending ever. And this one here, if you want to have a fancy word for that, that's called clausula. That's a C, vera. And if you're Spanish speaking, you would know that vera means true. So clausula means closing. So a true closing or true ending is one where you go from scale degree 2 to scale degree 1, because those are the two ends of the scale. In fact, this is scale degree 7, this is scale degree 2. The two ends of the scale that basically will go in contrary motion and close the sequence there. In between, we're going to now add a fancy predominant. We're going to start with the most fancy of them all. 2 half diminished 6/5. Okay, and the bass is easy as pie because you can see that there's one note that's missing here. You can see that this one leaps or skips a beat from scale degree 3 up to scale degree 5. And here's the million-dollar question: what is the note in the middle? That's a no-brainer because if we sort of fill in this stuff here, right? 1, 2, 3, 5. Well, 4 is the note in the middle. And that's how we're going to do it here. And now we can see that the equally obvious choice is really to fill in the gap between these two notes here. If I draw an imaginary line, you don't even need to know anything about music theory. You just have to be able to draw a line. Thinking that it maybe, oh, I do actually have, hold on a sec. Ta-da! I have a ruler here. I have a ruler, and I'm just simply going to say, okay, here's my quest. I'm going to draw a line, sorry, between these two notes. It helps to have a brain as well. I got a ruler, so I got that one down. But if I try to draw a line between two notes that are actually the same, I'm probably not going to get anywhere. All right, so switching my brain back on, I'm simply just going to draw a line and see where does that cross. And it's a totally no-brainer to say, okay, G is going to be a darn good predominant. And I'm just going to add, do I have any notes that are staying the same? Because that's going to be even easier to read than if I did some, you know, if you notice, all the voices here are moving by step. They're all moving by step. This one here has a little skip, but it's bum, 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 bum. That's the one we've heard a billion times. So that's not so difficult to do. But other than that, all the voices are either staying the same or they're moving by a step. Even your amateur singers who claim to not be able to read music, they can see that things are going down by a step, and they will, unless they've been taught some clumpus method of analyzing all the scale degrees or singing some fantastical syllable. You know, if they're just singing and using their natural instincts, they'll sing the right note. But of course, you can beat that instinct out of people by teaching them a lot of ear training. If you have some fancy hand symbol and it goes along with, you know, this sort of stuff here and calling it lila or something like that, then sure, that can be screwed up. But if there's a note that these three stations here have in common, and there is, because this one here is, ta-da, right there. Okay, sorry. Here I was just talking and I was not really watching what I was doing. Pretty soon I'll get Kevin on the phone and say, oh, shouldn't that be a B flat? And yes, you would be right about that. One day you will do it and you will find out that it is not so easy.
I was thinking that.
Very good. I beat you to it, mate. I said B flat and I wrote B flat. That happens, okay? So, okay, this one here has a flat 5 in it. Which one is the 5? Well, we'll see that G is actually the root of the chord. How do I know that? Because this is the 7. 7, 8, they will be next door to each other. 5 and 6, you see that? Above that bass, you will have a 6. That's the G. And you will have a 5. That's the F. So this one is the root of the chord. Here's a good strategy. If you have the chordal third in the bass, put the root on top. If you have the root in the bass, put the third on top. Just remember that. Remember that because when you're writing and you can't hear it, because that's the way you're going to do it for grad school, especially at the entrance, because they really want to nail you there, right? If you can't hear it, you have to have a great strategy. I mean, I can hear this now because I've done it for many years. But if you're only taking a course that lasts like 5 semesters, then chances are you're not in 5 semesters going to end up having learned, as many of you do, when you come into our course with a lot of talent, but not having read a lick of music in your life, having learned to recognize all these dots and squiggles and know what they mean, etc. And oh, this 6 is different from that 5, and this 3 is different from that 3, etc., etc. There's a lot to keep track of, and chances are that in 5 semesters you're not going to be ending up being able to hear this. And you hear a lot of people, such as my director or our director, the dean of the program. She has perfect pitch, and she was probably, as best we can tell, a child prodigy, because she debuted with orchestra when she was 9. You know, that's a pretty good indication right there. And of course, she doesn't need to know a whole bunch of this stuff here, although it does help, especially when you're teaching it. But if you have perfect pitch, my daughter has perfect pitch as well. People with that skill can hear all these voices because they can hear what they're actually sounding like when they see the notes. God bless them, but it's only 1% of people who have perfect pitch in the world. The 99% of the other plunkers, like myself and like you, you know, we don't have that skill, and it's both a curse and a blessing. Because there's a great deal of flexibility that you have if you don't have perfect pitch, for instance. You just have to know how things are related. So that means, back to this one here, I have the third, I have the root, I have the 7th. I need a 5th in this one here. And if I waited with the tenor till the last moment, I can see that here is, and I have to identify that that note is D flat. I have a C here, a C here, and the D, some type of D goes in here. If it's that chord, it's this one. I'm now going to change this to another chord. If I say it's just a 2-6-5, right, which would be a minor 7 chord in first inversion, I'll just have to erase this one. So we can see that all these different permutations of different chords, they're not really different as much as they just had one note change, because to sing from a C up to a D flat and then back to a C, it's no more difficult really than to sing from a C up to a D and back to a C. That's the same thing. One is a half step, the other one's a whole step. But we can see that what appears to be a different chord is basically a linear and melodic consideration rather than anything else. Because if let's say I change this all the way to the first chord in our sequence. Let's say I want to do a 4 chord. I'm going to change this one here to another predominant. And your next set of homework is probably going to, it's going to look a little bit like this with a beginning and an ending, and you just have to fill in this one here, because I want to focus on this. This semester is really focusing just on predominance, because this is our chord vocabulary. So a 4 chord would be a B flat major triad, because that's the kind of scale of B4 we have in the key of F. And I would just take whatever note came before it, you know, or I could, if I were to skip up, for instance, up to a B flat here, right? That would be a somewhat difficult leap to negotiate for a beginner student or an amateur singer in your church group. If you're a Juilliard, and let's say you started playing the violin at the age of 3 and you're perfect pitch, or you're, let's say, a soprano at the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra, or the chorus, doing this is not a problem. Do you understand? It's just not a problem. The considerations are only really ones that musicians who are working with amateurs and who want to get through grad school, et cetera, without having perfect pitch and having started at not 3 in the morning, but 3 years of age, we have to have better technique. If you have golden fingers, as we call them in the business, you don't need a great technique. And you'll see many virtuosi out there who just have an abundance of talent that will obviate the need for great technique. They, in fact, don't have great technique. And some of them are terrible, terrible teachers because they don't know how they do it. They just do it. And they develop their skills long before they could even think. Back to my forecourt, I would have my F here, and I would probably have my D up here, like that. You can see that it doesn't flow very well. It comes to the stop here. We're sort of hitting the wall here, and then we're continuing, and there's not a good continuation. If I do that, I can see that I've negotiated the distance between the two, and that works too. So everything works here, and so if I have a G, you know, I could do that. I can't double this one here because that's parallel primes. I can't do that. So this one here is skipping down to the D. This one is going up and everything's good, but not so much for this one. And I also have the same voice here, which is really, you know, it's possible, of course, right? But it's not really good writing as such. So we can see that, if I add this one here, which is a nice juicy chord, you have a seventh in it, I can either do this or I can do that. And this is the most colorful one. So now I've changed all these notes here to most of the ones in the sequence. This is 2 half diminished 6/5 again. So you can see that they're more similar than different. And that the different chords, they're not different really. They're just sort of expansions of the same idea of the subdominant, as it's called, unluckily, you know, because it is not subservient to the dominant. It is simply just the dominant under the tonic. And I can illustrate that. Let me illustrate it in a better key. If I'm in the key of C, this is the dominant, this is the subdominant. This is the 4th scale degree. But really what it means is that this is the dominant under the tonic. That's what it means. So any cadence, and cadences that go straight from the 4th scale degree to the 1 are actually older. They're much, much older than the tonal cadences that make use of the dominant above the tonic. Okay, I think we're good for now. That's the origin of all these predominants, and that's why we're lumping them together. Because very often you'll see in certain theory books, you'll see the ones from the major mode are introduced first, and then 2 months later, the ones from the minor mode are introduced. And then in some other semester, we'll talk about romantic harmony, and we've long forgotten about the connection between the two. And they'll say, oh, you know, in romantic music, you can mix all these things together. So you have a minor predominant in a major mode or a major predominant in a minor mode. And all of a sudden, it's really, really confusing because the connections haven't been made early on. Okay, cool. Over and out from here. I think I've yapped enough. And I'll see you next week. Your homework's in the mail, as they say. The check is in the mail. And just do your best. The homework I got this morning from 2 of you was just spot on. So we're doing great. And for those of you with no names that I'm coaching privately, fret not. We'll get there. I don't know how much we'll get, but we'll do our best. That's all we can do. Questions? No? Yes? Okay, good. I got a thumbs up. Fantastic. See you later, guys. Over to Professor Carlos.
Hello, everyone. It's good to see all of you. It's 11:10. Let's take 5. Come back at 11:15 and do some history stuff. All right. So get a glass of water, stretch, and I'll see you guys in 5 minutes. So when I play a video for the history portion that's copyrighted, then the whole video gets blocked. So then I have to edit it out. It takes me like 2 hours, and frankly, that's beyond my job description. So I shouldn't have said that when recording. I have to edit that out. All right. So let's recap from last week. Kevin, remind me what was the one takeaway that I kind of insisted upon that you guys should take into consideration for the rest of our studies. It had to do with a new texture. So we know that there is a monophonic texture. We know there is a polyphonic texture. So I was arguing for another kind of texture. What was it?
You said other than polyphonic or homophonic?
Or monophonic. So monophonic, polyphonic, those are two differences, but then homophonic, tell us about it.
Well, it was a melody with an accompaniment.
Aha. So why is that important, you think, Kevin?
Well, it wasn't really done before, and I remember that we were learning about the figured bass and how musicians would know what chords to play just based on the one note that their staff had.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kevin. So that's actually what I was looking for. This is important because every single aspect of your musical career and your lives around music has revolved around this texture, the homophonic texture, which implies the accompaniment of a melody through chords, right? So when you want to write a song, you're not thinking, well, let me write a 5-voice contrapuntal piece for choir. You're thinking of a melody and how to accommodate everything else around it. So that's very important, right? Because it not only hasn't been done before, but it's the beginning. It's of that which is the most important aspect of your musical lives. So it's very important to understand not only that it originates in the Baroque period, but rather that its long-lasting effects are very much alive today. Does that make sense? So that's really, really important. Now, let me ask you, Athalia, if you were to think of today, what is the most comprehensive, all-encompassing, most complex form of entertainment today, to this day? Athalia, you are muted. Athalia going once. Athalia going twice. Right. Joel, are you with us? Joel, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry, I had to pull up my phone.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. So if it were up to you to tell me a little bit of what the most important part of, what is the most complex form of entertainment today, what would you think that is? In terms of arts, like not sports really, because
okay.
I understand the NBA is cool, but
I guess in terms of music, I guess anything that's not like
performing arts. Let's talk about performing arts. Yeah.
Right. Can I say an artist's name if that's fine with you?
Sure.
Jacob Collier. I think that alone, that kind of like type of music, expanding it, or like kind of just not what we're used to kind of thing.
That's cool. I actually, do you mind putting it in the chat, because I'm not familiar with this person. But if you think of not only an artist, but a musician, but rather a form of art that's highly entertaining, that combines scenery, that combines music, that combines acting, that combines all of the stuff, what would that form of art be?
Oh, like Broadway, I would say for sure. That alone, like the production of it and the budget for it and everything, like as far as like getting people together and stuff.
I'll do you one better though. How about if you think about like the Avengers?
Oh
So,
yeah, okay, yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, you're
right?
absolutely right. It's like film. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
film.
true.
Film is by far the most important and more complex, more all-encompassing entertainment. So by the way, I'm going to start instituting a rule that every time I call on someone and I go down the countdown and you guys don't respond, I'm going to kick you out of the room. You can sign back in. That's absolutely fine. Though I've disabled the waiting room. But if you get kicked out of the room, it's because I called on you and you didn't reply. Is that cool? Give me a thumbs up if you guys understand that. Okay, 1, 2, 3, Joel. I'm assuming you heard me. So there you are.
Yeah. Yep.
So Athalia, are you with us? Athalia going once. Athalia going twice. Athalia going 3 times. All right, so you can tell her what the policy is. So now that we are sort of thinking about entertainment, Calvin, would you agree with that? With movies being like the most complex and all-encompassing form of entertainment?
Definitely.
So staying with you, Calvin, then, what is needed to make a movie? Like, what are some of the more practical things that you need to make a movie?
Well, if you don't include the huge budget, you need actors.
Mm-hmm.
You need like a lot of like technology because they have like the green screen and everything.
Mm-hmm.
You need it depends on like what movie you're like going for because I think action movies require more.
Mm-hmm.
Like romance movies or something like that. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like a lot of time and investment you have to put into making like the final product.
Right. And let me ask you a very kind of silly question. Yes,
Professor,
Johanna.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but Athalia is saying that it's not letting her join back in.
Oh, that's a shame. Are you able to share the invitation with her?
Yeah, sure. I'll do
Thank
that.
you.
Right.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's weird. I wonder why. I don't know if when I kick people out, then they can't log back in. That's good to know. Okay, so Calvin, let me ask you a very silly question about technology. What is the one necessary technological development for any technology whatsoever, any electronic to work? What do they depend on? What aspect of technological advancement do electronics depend on?
Is it energy? No.
As silly as it sounds, Calvin, yes, electricity.
Yeah, I knew it was one of those. Yeah.
So why do I ask that? And Kevin, I know you had your hand up, so let me ask you something. If you want a all-encompassing form of entertainment, but electricity is not around yet, what do you do?
You go to see a public theater for a play.
Right, and a play has a lot of acting and props and stage management, but it doesn't have a lot of music. So what form of performing arts has a lot of music, a lot of bad acting, or some acting, and props and stories and effects?
Broadway.
Yes, Broadway, definitely. And other than Broadway, we have drum roll. Singers, I'm counting on you to answer this.
Opera.
Thank you, Kevin. Opera. So, my good friends of Literature and Materials 3, we are going to study the beginnings of Baroque opera, but not because, oh my God, it's opera, but it's like, it's the highest form of entertainment. Whether it's the most artistic entertainment, that remains to be seen. I mean, I'm not gonna be like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. It's arguably, it's kind of like a The plots are silly. Some of the songs are very silly. They're long. But if you think of a time before electricity, how on earth are you going to pass time? Right? Like, okay, so you go to work and you go to church. And then what? Like, you can only read so much. You can only do so much. So opera comes out of the gates as the ultimate collaboration between all of the arts, right? So what are the performing arts? We have dance, acting, we have singing, right? Then we have all the visual arts, where all the props and engineering and all that. Then we also have the written arts, right? Those who provide the plot and the libretto. So with that in mind, I want to introduce you guys to the beginning of early Baroque opera. Now, Johanna, well, sorry, an update on Natalia?
Oh, I'm still trying to send her the link, but she's waiting for the link.
Okay.
You want me to send you the link, Johanna, so you can send it to her?
Yeah, send it to me because I go to E360 and do it. But go ahead.
Oh no! You can from Zoom here.
Oh yeah.
You can actually do that from here. Yeah. All right. So hopefully she'll be able to join. Feel free to interrupt me in case that's not the case. I'm going to share my screen. As you can see, I'm not in my study anymore. I'm in the living room because I need to be plugged out. So I have an Ethernet connection. So hopefully my extension will get here next time. That's why the change of scenery, and I'm realizing that I need some color in that wall because that's pretty white. All right, so I'm going to share my screen for you guys to take some notes on the following presentation, and then we can sort of go from there. So this is kind of what we were talking about today. The beginning of homophonic texture in earnest, how figure-based was the most important development for an accompaniment, right? An accompaniment that you're placing the full thrust and importance of music in what? In your melody, but it's usually a song text. So text here is the important bit. Remember, text is, people think of text so important that they change the musical rules in order to highlight it. So that's really important here. And the last thing I want to mention is that here we are witnessing the emergence of tonality. All of the stuff that you're studying with Dr. Francine, all the stuff you studied with me last 2 semesters, it's contained, its history rather, its seed comes from the 17th century and the concept of figure bass, right? I'm not saying figure bass equals tonality. I'm saying that all the formulas start to become much more syncretized and sort of bound together in this particular moment. But as I was saying, let's talk about early Baroque opera. Joel, would you be able and so kind as to read this paragraph out loud?
Yes, sure. Hold up. Sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. An opera is a drama sung to continuous or nearly continuous music and staged with scenery, costume, and action. It is composed to libretto, Italian for little book, a play usually written or rhythm or unrhythm verse. How do you say that?
Quintessential.
Quintessential, sorry. Oh, I gotta sit down. I'm at work, guys. Sorry.
You're at work. Damn.
Yes. I'm multitasking. The quintessential art form of the Baroque, combining as it did action and reaction, drama and spectacle, poetry, music, and the visual arts. Opera was to become the most common path to fame and even occasionally fortune for many composers and performers of the era.
Thank you so much. That last bit is very important because music so far was you either go to church and they pay you, or you kind of are under the employment of a monarch or someone in power. But that was kind of it. Now, we are also starting to witness what will become the world of celebrities, right? And the world of individual artists as their own business person. So we're gonna talk about Baroque music. And remember, Baroque music is theatrical, it's exaggerated, is rough around the edges. It's kind of got some great, and it's really whimsical. It's really, really, really weird in many ways. And this is where it starts. So roots of Baroque opera, this is a very important slide. If at all, at any point, the slides become blurry, please let me know. I hope I fixed that issue. But so far, I think it's working out because no one's saying anything.
Professor,
yeah.
Athalia can't come in. It's saying that she can't go in because she was removed by the host.
Let me see. How can I unremove someone? Thank you. Let me see. Participants. Invite. Tell Athalia that I am going to try to let her back in. I was kind of hoping Zoom would tell me. Brooms, right? Brooms A1 at NIAC.edu. I'm assuming that's Athalia.
Yeah.
So tell her that I just sent the invitation over email. She should get it on her NIAC account. I kind of wish, like, I felt bad about it, but
she said that she couldn't hear you calling her.
Right. So, you know, that is just how it goes. This is an entry. Allow participants to unmute themselves, play sounds when someone joins leaves, allow participants to rename themselves, lock meeting. You see, it's not really telling me that I can let people in. Like once I remove them, let me see. Sorry, I'm gonna ask Google. So don't test me, guys. Okay, where were we? Thank you, Calvin. I appreciate that reaction. By the way, I didn't know there were emojis now. That's cool. All right, let's go back to my presentation. Here we go. So sharing my screen. Boom, share, play, and off we go. So this is an important slide because what used to happen is that people would go to plays, right, and see a play. And what's important here is that the screenplays were based on Greek and Roman mythology because they were thought of being a moral pathway to good citizenship, right? So at the end of the day, you were witnessing a tragedy that had a moral at the end. That wouldn't change for a long time. But the cool thing is that in between acts, you have the musicians come out and play and do a little play within the play or commentary, usually humorous or lovely or whatever. Now, people would start to like be really into this moment, like intermedi. I mean, it's an interlude, right? So you have a play and then you have like the comedic musical relief. People would like really like that. So that starts taking a form in and of itself. And then, have you guys ever heard of the Medici family? Anybody? Kevin, have you ever heard of that last name? So these people were the big guns of Florence in Italy. Back then, Italy wasn't a country. It was a whole bunch of city-states, so like important cities. And Florence was like, it's good to think about it like New York, not in terms of its cultural diversity, but rather like the World Trade Center, right? Like what London is today or New York is today. These folks were the bankers. So they were the money folk. Think about them as a successful version of the Trumps. So the Grand Duke of Grand Duke Ferdinand de' Medici, right? One of the big guys here, gets married in Florence in 1589, and they demand. It lasted like 10 days, by the way. They demand an elaborate musical production with as lavish a setting and music as they could. Well, turns out that someone took the bother to recreate this, and I'm going to show you how, like a contemporary Baroque representation of how this wedding came down, like the musical representation. So this is not opera, but this is like the beginning of opera. So I'm going to play a 5-minute clip of this wonderful production and recreation of the Medici. Johanna, any news on Athalia?
She said she's still not able to join because it's saying that she was removed.
Well, I probably have to restart the meeting, and I won't do that. So tell her that.
Calvin is taking notes for her. He's gonna help her. We're gonna
Thank you.
the notes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, as I said, like I love you guys, but just when I'm be good to me, and I'll be good to you. I'll keep being good to you. Anyway, everybody can. Let me stop this share. Oh, sorry. Okay, cool. Share screen. This. Boom. You guys can see this. So this is the Stravaganza di Medici, or dei Medici, in which it's a recreation of what people in the 1589 wedding of Ferdinand de' Medici would have seen. And watch it, watch the video, watch the production, because I want to talk about it a little bit, okay? Here we go. Like I said, here we go. Come on. Third time with the charm. Sorry. Notice how you can tell there is a melody, and everything kind of revolves around it. I think that's a good idea, a good starter. Calvin, I'm curious. What do you think? Is this extravagant enough? How would you qualify what you saw? Like, do you have to go wash your eyes after this? Like, what do you think?
It was definitely like really like it was very well put together. It's like really extra. You know, they were like singing in the clouds.
Mm-hmm.
It's like really like I don't know. The voices it was nice. The visuals were like on point. Everything was like nice. It looks like it cost a lot of money to put together.
Well, when you're the banker, you got the money. So imagine this, like, I insist, yeah.
The visuals was kind of scary. They had too much stuff in their faces,
Well,
Calvin.
for us today, right? But this is a good point, Johanna, because even though I'm sorry you weren't well enough to be here, but one of the things that we characterize, Kevin, I actually liked when you defined the Baroque, when I asked you what characteristic of Baroque is. So let's remind Johanna, what are some characteristics of Baroque music, Kevin?
Overly extravagant, very flamboyant, I think was the word I used.
Yeah, flamboyant, extravagant. My favorite term, theatrical, exaggerated, grotesque. Thank you. Baroque music. Again, people weren't out to be like, we're gonna be grotesque. But what the intention was is that for the first time in a very long time, people felt self-aware enough that what they wanted to produce as artists was their own emotional expression. And for better and for worse, it happened to be in that, like, the heart on your sleeve type situation, right? If you're going to cry, the depiction wasn't a sad person going to the corner and quietly sobbing. It was, I am crying, oh my God. And then like when you die, it's like, I am going to die, I. Like that was, I mean, I wish I were kidding, but that is sort of like how expressing yourself worked, because art music in particular, was completely bound to the church. And that's not a bad thing at all, right? But rather, it is the reality that when you are expressing your devotion to God, even though today we are more prone to use that as a bridge for self-expression, being contrite, being reserved, being intimate, and being very technically nimble was how people at the time expressed their worship in music. So that's important, right? Because this is new, and I keep going back to this, guys. Like, imagine a time when something didn't exist, right? Like, I don't know, pretend that I literally can't think of something that can surprise us anymore, unless like, I don't know, teletransportation, right? Like the fact that we could maybe, I don't know, something, we just don't have that experience. These folks, this was an experiment of something never before seen, and boom, this is what we have. So in the spirit of trying to finish the lesson today at some point, let us continue. Now you know that the intermedi were musical breaks in a play, right? This intermedi then start taking their own life, and they become something called a pastoral drama. Now, pastoral drama is also a play, but it's a source for early opera just as much, right? In here, though, the spoken word is also sort of music starts seeping into spoken word, and there is incidental music, meaning there is music to set the scene, right? Like kind of like film scoring. That's incidental music in a way. The idea of having storytelling based on Greek and Roman plays, again, was based on the moral portrayal, especially of those who are putting this place together. Right? Like if you are a king or an aristocrat or whatever, you're paying for a play not to make fun of you, but rather to, like, almost as a propaganda, right? We're still in the high Renaissance, early Baroque. It's not like people woke up in 1601 and be like, oh, I guess we're in the Baroque period now. This is the transitional period. And I say that because there is a lot of interest still in the humanities, so arts and literature, as it were, into looking back into Greek tragedy and thinking like, well, if Greeks and Roman societies were the pinnacle of civilization, this is worth imitating, right? We don't have to start from scratch. So when people were studying Greek tragedy, for instance, there's a lot of references to music and to choruses. There's nothing written. We don't know what happened, but that was their cue. So opera is not really only so much something that somebody sitting down with a guitar came up with, but it's rather like a very self-conscious effort of looking back and coming up with art forms that, even though they were new, reflected a civilized way of thinking. Is that clear? I hope you guys are taking notes, because I will be asking about this, and I will announce a change, as a matter of fact, at the end of this class. So anyway, also a very important slide that you guys should take into account. Remember that when we talk about history, we talk about written history, and a lot of that written history comes down to us in the form of a class-based history, meaning people with enough power were the ones who were able to write and to leave documents behind, right? How is that important here yet again? It's because most of these folks who were doing this type of research and coming up with these concepts were all part of the economic higher classes, right? So we have Girolamo May, and look at the dates, right? Like it's like edging towards the change of the century here. He was a patron of the arts. He was a successful business person who was also a researcher, right? And believed that Greek tragedy was sung in its entirety. And it was sung in the way that we're thinking about. It's like one melody with accompaniment, and then the chorus sort of like jumping in, precisely what you just saw in the Stravaganza di Medici. Alongside with Girolamo May comes Giovanni de Bardi and Vincenzo Galilei. Now, let me ask Johanna, have you ever heard of the name of Galileo Galilei?
I think I have.
He's an important dude because he came out with something that almost put him on the stake to be burnt alive. What did he say about the universe?
He was like
Oh yeah.
Center.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Cal.
We are the center of the universe.
He what?
He proposed that the Earth isn't the center of the universe, that we revolve around the sun.
Yes. And how did the Catholic Church take it? Not lightly.
Yeah.
Right? He had to backtrack. But check this out. His daddy was Vincenzo Galilei, another wealthy person, right? So like all these laws of science and all that stuff, like they don't come from like the regular folk. Like these are like rich people's ideas, which are great ideas. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a flat earther whatsoever. I'm all for Galileo Galilei. But we have to recognize.
Professor, you said you're not a flat earther?
Yes, that's what I said.
Oh, okay.
These days you just have to recognize what
that the earth is flat.
That the earth is indeed not flat.
No, I know. I think the earth is flat.
Good for you.
Anyway,
May you sail into the horizon and hopefully not fall, or I don't know, get back to California. Yes, Kevin.
First, did you say that all these ideas came from rich people?
For the most part, yeah.
Do you think it'd be possible that other people actually came up with the ideas and then the rich people kind of took the credit?
That's harder to prove when you go back that long, right? What I know of, say, this period of time is that the documentation of knowledge was not widely spread into society. So even though right now, not only clerics, but also wealthy people were able to write, and people were writing about not God, but more earthly stuff, you still don't have regular folk, like you don't have the bakers sort of ideas of the universe. And I mentioned that because, funny enough, we do have one account and some accounts that come to us via the archive of the Inquisition, right? So some people who were tried in the Inquisition were asked, well, how come you believe, and I'm quoting, how come you believe the universe is a ball of cheese and angels are worms who have created us? And that sounds ridiculous, but this is actually, if you don't believe me, Google the, what's this guy's name? Carlo Ginzburg, Ginzburg, The Cheese and the Worms. And that's a book that traces the account of a baker who believed in this stuff. Now, it's not a joke, right? Like, there is a lot of information circulating, but Kevin, to answer to your question, scientific inquiry, as it is today, it's almost reserved for those who have enough spare time. And how do you have spare time? Because you have enough time to take spare time. Enough money to take spare time, right? So that's just, I mean, I don't like it, but that's kind of how it goes. So we're talking about Vincenzo Galilei, who is the father of Galileo, who comes up with this. He didn't propose the second practice as we were talking with Monteverdi, but people were thinking precisely about the issue that there was this old style and that we needed a new style, and that this new style needed the text to be the most explicit form of expression, meaning that the old style modeled and sort of obscured the meaning of the text by such high counterpoint. We talked about it before, right? Like when you have 5 people singing 5 different melodies to the same text, you have no idea what the heck's going on. It sounds beautiful, but it just doesn't communicate a message. So the centrality of the text is very, very important, and it plays a significant moment in the early operas. Now, for us today, when you compose a song that you have written the lyrics to, you want people to listen and understand and feel through your lyrics. So if you have 3 or 4 singers singing your lyrics, but one person singing, I love you, say you wrote, I love you even though you don't like me. Say that's your very profound lyric. One person is singing, I love you. Another person is singing, even though. Another person is singing, you don't. And you get the drift. At the same time, it might sound very beautiful. Are we understanding the text? No, we're not. So, first operas. With that in mind, you guys have to think about spectacle and text. This is very, very important. Jacopo Corsi, first producer. Now we're talking about producers, right? We're talking about rich people putting on plays, going out and getting some money, telling this like, hey, you want to look good? Why don't you put this in your backyard? Literally. They hired a composer, Jacopo Peri. We're going to listen to a little bit of what he did. And the first ever opera that was recognized as such or composed as such was called Daphne. by a poem by Rossini. The text is lost somewhere in a library or maybe forever. I'll tell you, if someone ever finds it, they will be rich, rich, rich beyond belief. Then a second opera, also set to Rinucci's poem, but this time L'Orfeo. Now, I've talked about the Orfeo before, I think. Do you guys know the myth of the Greek myth of Orfeo? Who is Orpheus and Eurydice? Have you guys heard of the dude who goes down to hell to rescue his lover?
Oh yes, Dante.
Well, Dante is a medieval spin-off of Orfeo, but yes, well done, Dante and the Divine Comedy. It's a wonderful
Yeah, I
play.
read the book. It was really good.
Yeah, it's a wonderful play. It's a bit of a knockoff, not completely, of Orfeo. Orfeo is gonna get married to Eurydice. She dies because a snake bit her, went to hell. Orfeo went down to hell to rescue her, convinced everyone that he should do it, but then Hades, not the devil, but Hades, the king of that realm, told him, you can take her, but you cannot talk to her and you can't look back at her, right? Because if you do, she turns into, anyone? Turns into stone, right? So, long story short, they're almost out. She turns into stone, end of the play. Actually, not end. He kind of goes back to the land of the living and gets over it and is happy. But this is an important moment. If you look at the last bullet point, the development of text as not only something that makes you feel, but what carries the story forward had to find a middle ground, because if you are singing all the time and break into acting like Broadway does, there is a little bit of a disconnect. Like, are we singing or are we acting, right? So what Jacopo Peri created, and we can acknowledge this to him, is a way of delivering text through a singing-like method that still was able to convey emotion. That is called the recitative. We talked about it last time. Joel, what is, if you can, what is a recitative? Even though you are working.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, what's a recitative? And thank you for being so on it.
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Recitative. Yeah.
To be honest, I don't know what that is.
Don't worry about it. Thank you for your honesty. Johanna, you are the singer here. What's a recitative?
Wow, thank you so much for putting me on the spot.
You're the singer.
Oh wow. What's his name?
Mm-hmm.
Wait. Oh wait. I have no idea. I don't know.
Well, good.
Professor,
good thing you're in. Yeah.
Isn't it pronounced recitative?
Recitative. It's Italian. C-I. It's pronounced "cha."
Oh man.
Yeah.
Learned
It's okay. It's okay. You speak Spanish, right?
Yeah.
That's why. Don't worry. No, you'll get it. Recitative is the imitation of speech in singing, as opposed to an aria, which is just singing the text. So Johanna and Calvin have all sung arias, whether they like them or not. And it's like this beautiful long song with long notes and flashy stuff. The recitative, on the other hand, it's delivering the text, right? So if in your play, you have to tell your hero, let's go out of hell so that we can live together, that's not very important as say, because I love you, right? So the delivery of the text has to be quick, but still has to be sung. So you are in luck, my friends, because we're going to listen and watch the video of the prelude, the prologue to Orfeo by Jacopo Peri. in which it's in Italian, of course, but I want you guys to listen to something. You will hear the first 3 or 4 minutes of this video. She's sort of singing, but there is a lot of text. And then it's followed by a longer aria. This is probably the first and last time you will be confronted with this information until next semester. Well, maybe not. But I want you to see how this is also an innovation, right? The fact that you can have text being delivered so clearly, so emotionally, and then you have this beautiful song to end it. So with that said, let me share my YouTube screen and we can listen to that. Because I think it's quite beautiful, actually. All right, so it's a 5-minute video. Just bear with it. Remember, listen to the text, of course.
If you work in a team, you've got
Seriously?
to try Monday.com. Go to Monday.com.
Oh, this is the wrong one. Carlos. Sorry, guys. Like my computer is being absolutely ridiculous right now. There we go. No. See, a lot of text being delivered quickly, but it's also sung. Like it's actually quite beautiful. Aria. Isn't that so pretty? Like so pretty. But it's also very informative, right? You heard a speech-like introduction with lots of beautiful little turns melodically, but then you heard musical composition, right? So what is the takeaway from here? Takeaway is that we are at the doorsteps of the beginning of a full-fledged form of entertainment that was entirely delivered in singing. That was never before seen. But the idea was like, this was a very quaint, beautiful, nice, small production. I would be pressed to think this is a lot bigger than this, but this is what Baroque music allows you as contemporary performance to do. Take a rather small form or ensemble and make it sound like this. It had 3 people playing the instruments and 1 singer, and how pretty was that, right? So, you know, what do you guys think? I have 2 more slides for you, and I'll leave you guys alone.
So you said that Baroque music allows us to get a small, you said ensemble, like a small group of people and make it sound beautiful. Is that what you said, Professor?
What I'm trying to say, yes, but what I'm trying to say is that, you know, when you think about opera, you think of a big orchestra, you think of a big hall, you think of a big instrument, right? These very early operas, and for 100 years or so, if you have a couple fiddles and, you know, the big instrument, you've probably seen me play it, it's the theorbo and a cello, and 4 singers, you can have a whole play. Like, of course you could do it with an orchestra and with a chorus and all that, but you can have these performances also accommodate whatever it needs, because that was the spirit of the time. I mean, if anything, the spirit of the time was so entrepreneurial, right? Like it was so fitting to try to figure out how to do things that today, if you have the desire to do it, we could do this at night. If we were in school, I would have liked to actually have you guys perform some of this stuff as your final, but now you're gonna write a paper. Haha. So
no.
Well, we can't get together, so, you know, but that's my point. I mean, and I know this not because I'm reading it, as you know, this is the music I perform. One of the music that I perform. Like, I put a lot of effort into perform this. I was part of a much larger scene, but I guess the point I'm trying to make is that we still live in the Baroque. Like, you guys don't be intimidated with classical music into thinking that it's something beyond our capability of reproducing. It's right there for the taking. All right, couple more things very quickly. Monteverdi's Orfeo, not the first opera, but the first opera to achieve a place in the permanent repertoire, the standard repertoire of operas. You know, if you read the New York Times or whatever, they'll be like, this is one of the most performed ones. They did it here in at the Met, I think last year, a couple of years ago. This happens over and over again. The picture on the right that you're seeing, and give me a thumbs up if it's not blurry, meaning it's clear. Is that a clear picture? Awesome. That is the actual engraving of the Orfeo. The publication is the same poem. It's not the same opera, right? Same fable, not fable rather, but the same play. Monteverdi fashioned his recitatives very much after Perry, but what's interesting is that Monteverdi starts combining solos and ensembles, so not quite choirs, but like, you know, 2 or 3 people singing at the same time, which is more resembling of what we studied before, which was called madrigals, right? The madrigal is an Italian form of vocal music in which 4 or 5 singers sort of tell a story, sing a Sontarina story, right? And the ritornellos, this is going to come back to haunt us. The ritornellos as the bullet point says, are recurring musical sections, right? In between, and choruses, sure, like it could be, there could be text in between longer verses, right? So you're singing, I love you, love you, love you, I'm gonna die, and then you have an instrumental little dee, ding, tam, pam, pam, pam. I love you, I'm gonna die, and then the same thing, right? That ritornello will be very important in later developments. So pay attention to that. Just because I'm a huge fan of Monteverdi, I'm just gonna play you guys the overture. It's like a 3-minute overture, very theatrical, conducted by Jordi Savall, who just was diagnosed with COVID, so may he get over this hump. But he's one of the most important performers of Baroque music of our time. So let's just watch the theatricality of Jordi Savall's performance of Orfeo. Just the beginning, which it's one of the most wonderful productions you will ever see, I think. After this ad. Check it out. This is a boss. This is all on YouTube. You can watch the whole thing if you are so inclined. It takes some stamina. It's a 2-hour production, but yeah. So again, focus on how theatrical contemporary performers are approaching this productions. This is really, really important, I think. Ain't that cool?
Yeah, it was dope.
Are those
Oh,
people
right.
actually playing, the ones that are on the top?
Yeah, they are playing. So Kevin, I'm glad you mentioned that. If you were in the theater, if you've ever been to an opera, like or Broadway play, like people are in the pit, and that's so cool. And all of a sudden, you're sitting down. Not only this dude's walking down the aisle, right? But there is this surround system from all over with like trumpets and drums and all that. Like, Kevin, what do you think is the takeaway from this production? Where is the Baroque aspect of this? Is it only in the fact that they're playing Baroque music, or are they taking liberties based on the spirit of Baroque performance as we come to understand it?
So I think they really want to like throw it in your face. They want to really make you feel like you are in the setting of the music and the time. With the way they choose how to position the instruments, and with the conductor walking like through you, like it's really, they really want to encase the audience into the world that they're starting.
Absolutely. It's almost a travel through time, but not because of accuracy, rather, but because of the spirit of a performance. Fun fact about Professor Carlos Cuestas: when I got married, our not processional but recessional was to this overture. We hired a quintet, a brass quintet, just to play this. So yeah, that was a good wedding.
Yes, Professor. Yes.
You guys would have liked it. It was a good wedding, good party too. All right, last two slides. I want to not forget, and we'll be done with this after this. Is that this is not only a man's game, even though most of the history, at least, is surrounded by this. Women played an important role, like for a couple of 100 years, not actually 100 years before this person came to fame. Before the like years right before I'm talking about, there was a competition of singers in between cities, and the ladies of Ferrara, a city of Italy, were really sort of important in the development of this music. But now we have a composer, right? Francesca Caccini. She was known for composing all sorts of music, but the one sort of outstanding piece that she composed was the Liberation of Ruggiero. It basically talks about a rather weak and languid male hero, and surrounded by a lot of strong women, right? That who rescue him and those who keep him in captivity. I don't know if reading this as a feminist stance by Francesca Caccini is accurate, but we also have to understand that women really had a very difficult time sharing any, like men would not share any space with women in that regard, right? However, in Tuscany, she was the highest paid musician, and she was trained by her father, Giulio Caccini, whose name we saw earlier with the musical treatise that he composed of figure-based and solo singing. The last two things that I want you guys to mention very briefly, you don't really need to know a whole lot about this, except that I'm going to take you guys out with a clip in the Farinelli movie. We'll talk about that. Rome, again, became an important city with money, right? As well as did Venice. We will see in the next slide. They start to extend the plot from just a moral sort of play into slightly more, I mean, it's still sacred, right? Still sort of like something in the realm of the saints and all that, but also comedies. And the idea of comedy starts to ring a lot of, it starts to ring important. Recitative and aria, as you saw by Peri, was now the bread and butter of opera, and this happened in the 1620s or so. And we start seeing the development of castrati, right? That's plural for castrato. Does anyone know why castrati are infamous for?
Tenors that sang really high.
And how did they achieve such range?
Really not sanitary means.
Were they like eunuchs?
They were nixed. They were castrated. Yeah. That's why they're called castrato, right? Castrated. So their male genitalia was cut off at the base, and that was done as they were children, by the way, before their voice broke, to keep a high range. Now, it was believed that even though it was the same range as women, the fact that their physicality was still that of men, apparently the high notes were even more powerful than that of women. We don't know if that's true. The last castrato who lived lived in the turn between the 19th and the 20th century. There are recordings of him as an old person, and it doesn't sound very good. But it's the beginning of recording, and he was an old man already. And finally, Venetian opera, that's where Monteverdi developed his career. Important about Venice is that the first public opera house opened, which means that opera was no longer the realm of private enterprise, but it was a business. It was a business that people would put money in order to sell tickets, bring people in, and even though theater was doing that already, now it extended to opera, and this consolidated opera in a similar way as what we think of the movies. You would go to see one of the most complex, all-encompassing productions of the humanities and the arts, the performing arts, right? So I want to play a clip of an aria that, of a movie of the 90s, I think 1997, titled Farinelli. Farinelli was probably the most recognized castrato singer of the time. This movie is a biopic that's kind of silly, but I think it captures the rapture of public opera, right? Like you're bringing people in to experience something they've never experienced, and people, there are accounts that people really went a little crazy, right? And this happened all the way through the 19th century, not only with singers, but also with pianists eventually, and so on and so forth. So this is like a 2-minute video. And with that, we will finish. So let me just share my screen. Let's watch this guy sing, even though I think the soundtrack is recorded by a woman by the name of Cecilia Bartoli, whom should be well known to some singers.
Yes, she is. She is.
Yeah, she is a phenomenal singer. So here we go. Well, after booking.com. Okay, skip ad. And here is a clip of Farinelli. You guys should check out the movie. It's quite entertaining. That's the brother. And with that, my friends, we start witnessing the development of celebrity cult.
Listen, if I don't get out of music school holding a note like she was holding that note,
Cecilia. You're right.
that wasn't a she?
No, sorry. Farinelli is played by a man, but I think the singer who recorded the soundtrack, I think it's Cecilia Bartoli. So you're right.
Okay, because I'm about to say, listen, but that was amazing. I loved it.
So Baroque music and Baroque society is not the same as this one at all, right? A lot of stuff happened in between, but we can see some remnants, right, of grittiness, of personality, of diva, of virtuosity, of showing off, but also of a need for expressing yourself. So now we're talking about very earthly stuff, very sort of dear to your heart type of stuff, and I feel like it's a good way to end this up and to wrap it up. So I have an announcement. We, Professor Lars and myself, we are going to split the days. Instead of you having theory and history at once, you will have one theory day and one history day. I will be doing the history bit on Thursdays. Dr. Franzen will be doing the theory bit on Tuesdays. So that's how we're going to do it. And yeah, that's kind of that's kind of all I have to say. Yes, Calvin.
No, nothing.
So Calvin, since I have you, can you close us off with a prayer and send us to our weekend in a peaceful, mindful way, blessed way?
Of course. Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this time, just to be able to learn more about musical history and the music that came before us. God, I pray for a productive week, a productive day. Lord, go before us, make the way straight. I pray that you be with us for the rest of the week. Yeah, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Make the way straight. That is true. Have a good night, everyone. Have a good weekend.
All right, thank you, Professor.
You too. Bye, Professor.
Thank you. Good to see you, Johanna. Bye.
Professor.
Yep, Kevin.